Growing a business is hard, but it does not have to be. Once a week, we take a break from the hustle and bustle in business to talk about innovations and what's new in the C suite. This is the Fractional C Suite Retreat, and I'm Joseph Frost. Pull up a seat at the fire, grab a drink, smoke a cigar, and just join me as we relax, learn, and get inspired. This retreat is sponsored by your CMO, helping organizations grow with better marketing strategy. Sean, introduce yourself and one thing you think we should be talking about with C-suite leaders today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Joseph. My name's Sean Foote, fractional CMO, full stack marketer with experience in B2B, B2C, and B2B2C. I think based on my experience and kind of what I've heard in the market, I think smart prioritization. We're going to have limited resources this year coming out of kind of some challenging times through COVID and post-COVID. And I think some of that historical challenge has made, purse strings a little tighter. So maybe enterprise adoption or organizational adoption of like effort versus impact and everyone buying into that. So investments can be made smartly.
As marketers, we're in the C-suite during those conversations. How can we, or how can each of you provide value in either dealing with some smart prioritization or mindful expansion topics?
As a data-driven marketer and business leader, I think I always point to data and what the story that tells to help kind of weed through some of the noise, so to speak, and set it up for we got to first figure out what we need to prioritize. Then we have to do some modeling on it, or at least have some conversations around again, that effort versus impact model where you're talking about what can we do that requires the least amount of effort, makes the largest amount of impact. And that's how you start to prioritize what projects get the funding and how the enterprise rallies around various efforts.
Yeah, and data is always a trick in our business. There's so much data these days. How do you determine how to get the right data to help make those informed decisions?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've done a lot of architecture around analytics, and I think first you have to make sure it's clean, of course, because operating off dirty data is a mistake a lot of businesses make. So making sure it's clean, making sure your tracking is clean. And I'm looking at this from a digital perspective, of course. And then I think, again, you go into, at least what I've done historically, is you go into business questions and what business questions need to get answered with that data. And then once you have an idea, the data is clean, you have the sources intact, and you understand what business questions there are that need to be answered, you can start to answer them by visualizing that data. And that helps kind of determine what is worthwhile continuing to focus on versus what is not.
And how does having access to a strategic, experienced marketing leader help with those mindful expansion discussions, or even those data-driven discussions, versus maybe a more mid-level or lower-level marketer that has the same access to the data and the same access to maybe some of the goals and desires? What is the difference of somebody who's a fractional CMO that has that strategic mindset going into these conversations?
I think businesses thrive with strategic marketing leadership because there's alignment between teams, resources, and ensures long-term growth, right? And I think marketing leadership, effective marketing leadership, isn't just about campaigns or tactics. It's about understanding business goals and crafting strategies that support those goals and drive measurable impact. Again, coming back to the data aspect, I feel like a strong marketing leader acts as a bridge between the rest of the C-suite, sales, and creative teams, and that helps ensure alignment and focus, right? I think what a lot of organizations are lacking now is focus. They don't really know what they don't know and what to rally around. And I think today, speaking, as a digital leader, and it's a digital first world, and leaders need to guide companies through the constant change and innovate and stay agile to customer behavior and technology, right? We're focusing, I think Swani mentioned understanding your customer, but what does that really mean? What motivates them? And how do we really put our messaging and everything in our product in front of them in a smart manner?
The other piece is a strategic, experienced marketing leader is going to come in and ask the hard questions that maybe a more tactical junior leader won't feel comfortable or not know how to ask. Like, why are we doing that? Why do we think that's the right target? What's the other thing going on in the business that suggests that this is the right path or the wrong path? And a good strategic leader is going to be part of those tough questions that help really hone in that long-term vision. I also noticed that, well, I also noted today I had a conversation with a business owner, $4 million business, looking to really grow, gotten to where he wanted to be with a lot of word of mouth and just early success. And now he's stuck. And this is so common. And the question he had to me is, do you have somebody who's going to come in and deliver results in the next 60 days? And I think that's a very common ask of organizations, of their marketing leaders. But a strategic leader is going to answer that question, I think, differently than a more junior tactical agency leader. And so my answer was, I think you should beware of anybody that says yes to that question, because it's going to take 30 to 60, maybe 90 days just to get the right strategy in place. It hasn't worked for the last couple of years. You haven't had a new client in 2 years. Why do you think someone else is going to, come in there and automatically generate results in 60 days? Do you see those kind of requests as a commonplace as a fractional when you come in that are a little bit, I don't know, naive or are too high of expectations? And how, if so, how do you deal with it? Or if not, what do you see?
Yeah, I'll weigh in too. So I think this is really about transformation of, I think, overall business approach, but specific to marketing. I think we need to go from a scattershot approach where we're wasting resources, creating confusion internally and externally, to approach that's more focused, and I'll keep bringing it up, data-driven and results-oriented, right? I think, what does that look like, though? Because that's the secret sauce. I think you start with an audit, right? You need, I think, to your point, Joe, you need to understand like where you've been, like what has worked, what hasn't. You need to understand where your efforts are being effective. And like I mentioned, that impact versus effort model, I use that a lot and I lean on that heavy. And then you take that information, that quantitative and qualitative data, and you start to build a foundation, right? You build clear objectives informed by past performance. You get customer insights. You have a strong value proposition, and then you have the basic tools to start to activate with. Again, I leverage analytics and technology, of course, to make sure that you're monitoring success and you can iterate and scale. And then you can even like highlight case studies of businesses that have moved from that structure. But, we don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel all the time. How do we move from chaos to structure, right? And create, I think that's really the basic foundation for a strategic mindset. So I think at a high level, that's really how I approach it. Learn from the past, reset the present, and then, forward to the future.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. My dog is in the background barking, and it reminds me of the barking stories of all of the competitors that are saying, I can do this, like this, and the noise that's out there, and the value that a strategic leader can really have cutting through that noise. The other question I would add is, how do we, during the strategy portion of an engagement, still increase the time to value? How do we bring value quickly to an organization as a fractional during the strategic process?
It's a matter of what you're working with. You have to really understand what the organization knows about its performance versus what it doesn't, first and foremost. Because if I'm two things I think of often are efficiency and effectiveness, right? So efficiency is looking at data and putting it up against benchmarks to see like where we can be better, right? So highlighting that, and effectiveness is basically your relevance in the market. And taking the data sets you have, taking internal perspectives, external perspectives, and blending them all together, and then finding those obvious gaps or opportunities for things you can do, maybe perhaps on a more tactical level that can move the needle, is what I would look to first.
Yeah, time to value is critical. But then also when we look at just value in general, we have to deliver as fractional CMOs monthly. We have month-to-month engagements, which is different than a lot of agencies historically. It's certainly full-time and even consultant work. How do you see that as being the future of fractional work and the expectation of business owners in the future as we move forward? This month-to-month deliverable of value is so critical. Do you see that as a trend that's going to continue, or do you think we're going to go back to more of a longer-term engagements versus the month-to-month?
Yeah, I'll grab that one first. I think this ties into what I said earlier, but I think month-to-month engagements offer flexibility. I think there's some transparency involved there, and it really helps with the results-driven mindset, making them ideal, I think, for modern businesses that need to stay agile to that ever-changing market I mentioned earlier. Businesses need the freedom to pivot and adapt, changing the changing markets without being locked into rigid long-term contracts. Fractional month-to-month models, I think, force leaders to deliver tangible results. It's a little bit more concrete. And I think there's no guarantee of longevity without performance, right? So month to month forces a little bit of accountability more than a longer term deal. And I think the model also encourages stronger collaboration, right? It's kind of an evolve or die scenario. And the communication is so critical because I think trust is earned continually, right? But I think a combination of understanding, hey, this is what we need to do after we learn about your business over however long it needs to be, but having that month to month, I don't know, the clock ticking, so to speak, really adds some urgency. And I think that's pretty critical. And I think the future of marketing leadership is agile. The market's agile. Why would you create a structure and framework that doesn't adapt to the market? And I think these month-to-month engagements embody the adaptability while also aligning incentives and business goals and results.
Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about customers, because I feel like even this client I talked to, this prospect I talked to today, when I was trying to understand who his ideal client was, he had a hard time describing it other than CIOs and CTOs. And we spend a lot of energy up front with understanding customers differently than maybe other agencies and other companies and consultants have. What is the value of really knowing your customer, and how do you get to know them the right way?
This isn't just a marketing challenge. This is a business challenge, right? Whether you're in sales or whether you're creative and you're designing something, we all need to understand our audience. We need to understand the consumer, the customer. And I think a deep customer understanding is the foundation for every successful business strategy, especially in today's hyper-competitive landscape. And what does that mean, right? I think, or what do you need to consider? I think you need to look at qualitative data or information, meaning surveys, interviews, focus groups. And you need to look at quantitative data, which is like effectively click data, analytics. And I think you need to embrace both of those methods to gather smart insights. And then I also think consumer behavior has shifted due to digital adoption and recent economic pressures with COVID and whatnot, and the shifting landscape on a macro level. And I think understanding all of those changes is key and to go along with the customer. And I think highlighting how empathy and emotional intelligence can translate customer insights into actionable marketing strategies is also a key meaning, like, how do you emotionally engage your audience? Right? How do you earn trust with them if you're thinking of the funnel from awareness to consideration to decision to retention when you're talking about lifetime value? And I think investing in the customer understanding isn't just good marketing, it's good business.
Yeah, that buyer persona project that we do as part of the audit probably is one of the strongest time to value pieces that we deliver. And it's surprising to me, all the years I've been around marketing, how little companies and other consultants and agencies spend talking to customers when developing personas. They sit often in a boardroom and maybe bring a salesperson or two in and then develop this persona based on inside out and without a lot of effort. And really, it's a low amount of time and a low amount of resources to generate these buyer personas from interviews with actual customers. The insights are validating in some cases of the internal assumptions, but also extremely insightful to new ahas and ideas for attracting these customers. And then, most importantly, I think, and it's not said enough, is the messaging, using the words that your actual customer used to describe your product or service or their needs is easy to uncover by talking to them. And then it's very persuasive when you talk to them in their own voice. And it's just such a simple concept, but so many businesses and organizations just don't, I think, understand its value, or how to do it maybe is more likely. And I think those are the kind of things that, a fractional CMO in our organization, it's the only thing we require all CMOs to learn, because all of our CMOs learn, everything else on their own. That's the one thing that we want everybody to go through the process of understanding. And most people, have done work like that in the past, so it's not brand new. But it is so important to us that everybody gets a chance to go through that. And I don't think that's the same with other even fractional CMOs that work with customers. What are some other ways that you're often finding customer insights other than the interviews?
Yeah, I think ultimately this is about listening, right? I talked about empathy earlier. And if we don't understand our customers and don't listen to them, I mean, we're not effectively engaging. And, if you're spending on advertising, you're blowing that budget. Spending on technology, you're blowing that budget, right? Because it's not as effective as it could be. Because I feel very strongly that once you have proper framework in place, you understand how to execute and whatnot, customers are constantly giving feedback, both directly and indirectly, right? What does that mean? Like, I think smart businesses know how to decode it. Examples of some direct feedback, reviews for e-commerce or products, NPS scores, surveys, right? Are pretty direct feedback, a little bit more qualitative than click data. I think indirect feedback, drop off points in the customer journey. What isn't working when I was talking to earlier? Social media behavior, social media engagement, any type of low engagement where things are broken or not working as quickly or effectively as they could. I think you really need to understand like what tools are out there for listening beyond the interviews we talk about. I know I've been parts of organizations like longer term, of course, that aren't I would say a quick win necessarily, but social listening platforms, right? Being mindful of the information you already have in your CRM. Effective sales teams will be constantly making notes and giving feedback. So I think, again, listening to your customers is the first step, and then acting on what they're saying is what builds advocacy and ultimately drives long-term success. I think they're just interjecting real quickly too. I think there's also this, like, I would say ruse or illusion that first-party data tells you everything, meaning the data from your platforms, that your CRM, your website, your Google Analytics, that's like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the data in the market, right? So how can you capture what's happening off your own platforms? When you're listening to social media, I can name a few like Talkwalker, Sprout Social, Hootsuite, some of these social media management platforms dovetail in with social listening. And you start to listen to what your competitors are doing on their social. You start listening to what's happening in the blogosphere. You start listening to what's happening in the news, meaning these are all platforms you don't own. You start to get a smarter understanding of your market share and where you stand and your brand sentiment, but you also start to really understand, I think, the opportunity, right? This opportunity, what you're learning can help close the gap to competitors. It also can shine the light on disruptors that you don't even know about potentially that are coming. And in my time, building those types of platforms, it's been super helpful, just like making smarter products, making more effective designs, making, you name it. Obviously, it goes without saying, more effective and efficient marketing activations. But I think don't think just your first party data is all you have. While it's important, when you're talking about Joe tying it in a closed room with internal bias, we have to go outside of that and start to listen to customers and listen to what the market's telling us.
Well, speaking of customers, let's transition a little bit. I'm curious, as you look at 2025, what are your goals? Who are your ideal customers as a fractional? What are you looking for? What challenges do you want to solve in the marketplace? Who do you want to work with? What are some of your aspirations this year?
I've been fortunate in my career to have been part of startups, SMB, and enterprise. I've worked with the startups, the tech SaaS startups. I've worked with the Googles. So I think I've been able to see, I've also been mid-market with like the Wiltons. And I think I've been able to see, of course, not all situations are created equal, but I've been able to see kind of what works and what doesn't to some degree. So I think being with that 5 to 10 to 50 to 100 million in revenue really is a sweet spot, because these organizations are looking to build what they're doing, let's say as a startup, isn't working anymore, right? It isn't working anymore. So they have to figure out a solution for scale. And when you're looking for scale, you have to start thinking about, Swanee mentioned earlier, systems and processes. You have to start, and some marketers hate to hear it, regulation. You have to slow down to speed up. And having an experienced CMO or any fractional leader that has been through it before can come and kind of hold the hand, so to speak, of the business owner that hasn't done it, and can save them a whole lot of time. You talk about time to value, and a lot of money in that process. And that can be, another way I look at it is kind of like maybe potentially project management, so you can execute cleaner. It can be analytics and building a better, solution there, so you have the data you need to make better decisions. It can be more understanding of your audience, so you can build more effective content to engage them through the buyer's journey. So I think that's really, I look for revenue numbers there, but really I think to Swanee's point, and I'll use her a term, I guess, expansive mindset for the business owner that understands they know what they know, but they also know what they don't know. And that's really what, so some humility, I guess, is a key word there.
Yeah, I think client and CMO fit is really important, and especially in fractional situations where you're not in the office every day and you rely on some remote trust building that has to happen for things to get done. And if that fit's not there, that's really hard to accomplish, even with the best processes and people. So that cultural fit's really key. I'll put you on the spot, Sean, and then I'll do the same for you, Swanee. But
Sure.
what are the 3 reasons why someone should consider hiring Sean Foote?
Oh, me personally, or are we talking about the model?
I'm talking about Sean Foote.
Right. I think I bring a quality of resilience due to some of that experience I've had. I've been a part of divestitures, I've been a part of acquisitions, I've had to manage and build teams through that. So grit, I think, is one, and resilience, creativity, and I'd say like an innovative mindset, meaning like 10x thinking, if you're familiar with that. Or, one of the things I took away from Google was moonshot thinking. One of the things I that just kind of irks me when I hear it is, we've always done it this way. So I like to shed that skin as soon as I can. I like to go, as soon as I hear that, I'm like, let's all go to a whiteboard right now and talk about ways we can do things that aren't the way we've done them before. Right. I'd say probably, again, we all have our bias, and everyone has personal bias, right? Whether it's on your personally or professionally, based on your experiences. I'd say my analytics, data-driven mindset, because I'm going to bring that with me everywhere I go. And like I said, when you have that information, again, first and third party, as I mentioned earlier, and you can put it together, it really tells a fascinating story, and it elevates not just your marketing investments and efforts, but all of the things I mentioned before: product, creative, IT. Everyone elevates as a result of that. So I'd say those are probably my 3 on the, shooting from the cuff a little bit. Those would be the 3 I'd choose.
Yeah, you did well. I think I would hire you. I think I did.
Yeah, I'd say similar to a lot of our discussion today, I can guarantee without a doubt, if you follow our framework and you leverage my experience, you're going to have a better understanding of your audience, and by extension, the market. And that will, again, not just impact your marketing. We have to think bigger than that. This will lift your entire organization or enterprise. So I think bringing that focus, again, beyond just that first party, what we know, to what we don't know, I think, and understanding, providing the tools and the process to better understand their market is really important.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for being here today. I think our our promise at Your CMO is that it's the combination of the proven process and the strategic expertise that provides way better marketing. And hopefully some of the listeners today and viewers got a little bit of insights to help them think about marketing differently from you two. And I really appreciate both of you being here today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
And that's a wrap. There's another successful episode of the Fractional C-Suite Retreat. See our show notes and more episodes at fractionalcsuiteretreat.com. This podcast is sponsored by Your CMO, helping organizations grow, save time and money with better marketing strategy and fractional execution. Visit them at yorcmo.com, yourcmo.com. Spelled wrong on purpose.